Good day, folks. We partially redeemed ourselves at the vote by abstaining this time. This time the abstention was good. But let me just, I've been getting this, I can tell you, I'm unabashedly pro-Western systems, having studied there in my formative years, which is when I was in the early 20s, worked there. I found that, the Iron Curtain, people like us and the people who continue to propagate Russia and USSR and keep thinking at what is being sold to us as the USSR are the underdogs and America is what's out there to destroying the world, is actually, it's really interesting. I ran into a Mahayuddh in my house. Guess what? Not between the general youth in politics, but between Ukraine and Russia. Then I had an incident where people now are blaming that they're not getting American visas, and the story that's being sold around is that's because of our stand against, which is not criticizing Russia. That's again really strange. Then I was at another conversation that's going on. This is a generation of ours which is probably graduated from Delhi University, essentially Delhi University, Lutyens Delhi schools in that time of USSR overload on India because of 1971 and everybody, including the Communist Party, had a huge hold on the politics of the Congress, and then you had JDU and what's his name, Fernandez, throwing out Coca-Cola, and we were going hey hey ho ho ha ha, and look at where it left us. It left us in the dustbin of poverty. That's exactly where it left us. I mean, this process of trying to pretend that we were holier than thou. But what you got from these conversations was the DNA, the family fight, right? We are all Delhi University guys, Stephens and SRCC, and guess what? Your current foreign secretary that is just retiring is Stephens, Delhi University Stephens. Taranjeet Singh in the US is Stephens. The guy I'm told the High Commissioner to Canada is Stephens. So guess if these guys are in control of your foreign policy, you can figure out. It's probably they're being taken to the being pulled through their teeth to be pro-American. Because Taranjeet, of course, I think is kind of understood, having spent the time in the United States, right? But here's what we get, and like I said, that thing continues. New World Order. Modi channels his inner Nehru, war criminal hypocrisy, Swaminathan Iyer. But hey, what do? Air India also stops its direct flights to Russia. We really can't get beyond that. Then we have this, right? In a Cold War, we are all Soviet fans in this hot war. Russia is no USSR. This is what Joy Bhattacharya, right? And this is what it is, right? The Russians were always the good guys for us, even as we were blissfully unaware that Stalin killed about 1 million of his own people and caused the death of around 20 million more. This is just like Mao, right? Personally, the Russian good guys narrative started fading from the late 80s. By 91, I was surprised at the alacrity with which former Soviet republics from the Baltic states and Ukraine to Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan wanted to get away from Moscow, and the delight of the Lithuanian squad when they defeated a combined Russian team for the bronze medal in basketball at 1992 Barcelona Olympics had to be seen to be believed. Okay, and this is what happened after the attack. And finally, throw out Russia from UNSC Zelensky. India condemns Bucha killing, backs probe, and this is where I think we started moving out. India's neutrality will be on test at UNGA. Vote today. Abstention will be seen as unfriendly gesture, says Russia. India abstains at UNGA, ousts Russia from HRC. So finally we took a stand. Russia suspended from UNHRC. India abstains. US Congress okays bill to suspend Russia trade status, enact oil ban. US NATO pledge more arms to Kyiv as Ukraine braces for more assault. And this is another funny one. Vinay Quatra envoyed to Nepal, named next foreign secretary, and the person in the running was Taranjeet Singh. A lot of people say they need Taranjeet Singh there because of the good work he's done in the United States. But hey, just remember, this announcement happened just after Sergei Lavrov visited India. And guess what? Taranjeet is probably viewed through the lenses as the Russians are seen as pro-West and pro-America. Did that have anything to do with Quatra's selection, guys? I don't know. If it is, messing in our domestic politics, folks, and our domestic policy. 3 cheers! So we have this article by D. Raja where he says it goes back to NATO. Ukraine conflict is rooted in the expansionary logic of the military alliance. What he forgets is NATO has always been a defensive alliance. And he has no right to talk to for the Latvias, Lithuanias, the Polish people who suffered unbelievable damage of East Germany from his colleagues. And also do remember, D. Raja and the entire Communist Party of India and the ZPIM were steeped in corruption from the USSR, were paid money to ensure that all policies of the Congress were left-leaning. And that's why you also had that George Fernandez and everybody else. But hey, what do we have here? He says, as NATO's track record suggests, instead of the collective security it promised, it has only offered grave insecurity to nations opposed to the US interests. Its needs have
filled the coffers of the military-industrial complex and monopolies, effectively diverting funds from vital programs that could otherwise be deployed to improve the lives and livelihood of the people. Which people, my friend? The West, who's deploying this, NATO, they have spent funds for and money in their economies. Why would they be interested in helping the poor in India, especially under Mr. D. Raja? Why would they be? Okay, anyway, India acted in national interest, chose sides of peace, even Europe using Russian energy, says EAM. US targets Putin's daughters in its most severe sanctions. No one will oppose if India backs such a process. Lavrov of Ukraine mediation. Now this is, India has to be really careful. A lot of people have stepped in. Turkey has stepped in. Israel has stepped in. India can also step in, but it's to be very careful that it is not used as a puppet by Russia, and it's not forced to attempt either the RIC or the BRIC meetings, because you really, Modi cannot be seen in between the ogre Putin and Xi. That'll be a serious meltdown. Russia pulls back from around Kiev to focus on east. Zelensky says troops leaving behind mines. They continue to bomb civilians, right? Willing to contribute to peace efforts, Modi tells Lavrov, you're right, he is. India pushes back firmly against US threats on Russia. India and Russia accommodate each other's national interests. So Lavrov went, as usual, flattery. And this whole thing is about flattery. They have figured out, and I've heard this KGB guy telling that Indians love flattery. And especially Modi. Modi's a narcissist, right? Amid sanctions, Russia offers alternative payment systems, but all these systems eventually will end up somehow getting linked by the Americans. You've got to be very careful, especially where 60% of their exports of finished goods is going to the United States. Appreciate India's neutral stance on Ukraine. Lavrov, payment mechanism in place. FMR interest, energy security come first. Why won't we buy cheap crude? Why won't we? Okay. Critical of Russia, US congressman backs deeper India-US ties. US holds back criticism on rupee-ruble deal. 2+2 will show India-US ties healthy, says US officials. And here's what we have. And Seema Srohi writes, dodging the anti-West potholes. The diplomatic traffic jam caused by the parade of foreign leaders and senior officials in New Delhi is no cause for self-congratulations or comfort. If anything, non-stop international arrivals mean more pressure and pain. If Singh sounded coercive, Lavrov appeared slippery, especially in the aftermath of the no-limits friendship with China. No one is fooled. He is skating on remnants of goodwill and old dependence in the Indian system. That's an old dependence. But for India, it can't be business as usual with Russia because it directly impacts business with the United States, and that's more important. In '62 India-China war, the Soviets helped China block delivery of MiGs to India and even shared the intelligence on India while the US supported India. However, in '71 it was reversed. That doesn't matter. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's presence in New Delhi was a bold attempt to create misunderstandings, especially with the US. Wang wanted a non-Western group hug to poke a finger in the USI, but was given no space by Jaishankar. If anything, the Indian Foreign Minister was pointed in saying India's position on the Ukraine war was very different from China's, even if both countries wanted an end to hostilities. Now, here's the fun part. She says the forced visit was also to probe prospects for India's attendance in the BRIC summit to be hosted by China later this summer. To be sure, China will use the summit and potential RIC meeting to project an anti-West coming together unless the situation changes drastically and peace comes to Ukraine. A photo of Putin, Modi and Ping holding hands in the last thing India would want. It would guarantee a meltdown in Washington and other Western capitals. Do remember that. There is a limit to this whole non-aligned bullshit and non-abstention. But finally, I think we are beginning to tilt to the right side. So as Pranab Dhal Samta rightly says, is this a 1992 security moment? What does he mean by that? He says Lavrov's visit is trying to be both gratuitous and understanding of the Indian line, knowing well that its unsolicited endorsement would only complicate an already difficult situation, which he wanted to do. The US is looking at crafting alternatives for Europe's energy needs by offering them matching deals with US companies in a bid to reduce dependency on Russia. Will it provide such alternatives to India on the defense side? And this is where India should be focusing, right? But for India, the rethink on Russia as its main military supplier has now acquired an urgency not because of global political shifts alone, but due to some hard truths from the Ukraine war. Is Russia's military and its equipment as competent as they used to be? GOI needs to study the ground situation in Ukraine carefully. Reports suggest that Russian military and equipment performance is below par, raising doubts over both competence and capability. And not only that, folks, the important thing to remember is now whatever China has from Russia is reverse engineered and hacked. What will be the impact of sanctions on Russia's defense industry? Over time, Russia's military industry too has been integrated with Europe and the world for input items like semiconductors and computer chips. So the supply chain for Russia's military industry will be affected, and that's bound to impact timelines and commitments. Third, how will the Russia-China axis impacts Moscow's approach to do military business with Pakistan? Finally, what will be the impact of economic sanctions on Russia? An isolated, economically battered Russia will financially integrate closer. In many ways, the Ukraine war could transform India's security policies, just like the breakup of Soviet Union changed India's economic approach. Up until 90, the Soviet Union was India's largest trading partner, and then the shift happened. And it's going to happen now too. And in this process, the biggest, most consequential deal that's gone down, and it's been played up well, and it deserves to be, is the India-Australia deal. FTA. And look at the concentric circles. It's got the Indo-Pacific, you got AUKUS, now you got the AUKUS and the US and what's his name, Australia talking about developing hypersonic missiles. And this allows us to get into the supply chain, including of pharmaceuticals and of vaccines, and Japan. Win-win. This is one of the most complementary economies, because we also get a whole bunch of stuff like uranium and now lithium and coal, and a lot of agricultural products can also eventually become part of the basket. India, Australia sign accord to double trade in 5 years. India, Australia sign FTA trade likely to double in 5 years, generate 1 million jobs. Australian opens doors for techies, chefs, students, millennials. This is the important part. Back to open up more sectors, says Australia. Both Australia, India set to gain from FTA. Then it says, and they were understanding of opposition. OZ understands India's Ukraine stand. Australia trade pact will counter autocratic government in region. Message is clear. India, Australia target 100 billion trade by 2030. And you ain't going to get this, as people keep talking about aligning with this Asian economies of China and Russia. Absolutely not. Australia may look at agri-worker visas, dual degrees. Indian PSU scout for lithium, cobalt and OZ. India likely to use Australian deal for energy security. India, Australia have accepted shared Indo-Pacific. Ours to others. India's growing heft demands confidently leapfrogging from Australia FTA to bigger trade deals. And the bigger trade deal is this one. Netherlands offers to be India's gateway to fuel EU green shift and FTA with the EU. So what are we doing in our region? Army chief visits Singapore, consolidating the ASEAN region, because they are getting very concerned about China too. But the problem in our neighborhood. Lanka opposition rejects unity government offer, seeks president resignation. Calls grow in Sri Lanka for Rajapaksa to quit. Neighborhood is in turmoil as Pakistan-Sri Lanka politics on edge. Imran names ex-CGS caretaker PM, but Sri Lanka speaker warns of starvation across country. Jaishankar speaks to Blinken ahead of India-US 2+2 talks. This is all happening, right? India-US 2+2 talks on April 11th focus on international peace. In outreach to West, India may tap oil reserves again. Ahead of 2+2 talks, India reaffirms ties with Russia. Congressman backs deeper India-US defense ties, right? Boris Johnson likely to visit India in 4th week of April. The parade continues. And this is the other one, right? Shringla may be named India's G20 chief coordinator. I, on the other hand, think that he should be actually the bigger position is the coordinator of the Quad. Quad should be given a lot more emphasis. Sri Lanka president will not resign despite protests. Sri Lanka constitutes expert panel imposes tax on rich. Gotta go students take front line in Lanka protests. And here's fun and go. Imran says he will continue to fight as he faces ouster vote. SC bouncer to Imran, can't evade trust vote. Cannot condone Russia's stand by Ukraine, says Bajwa. Now this is an important shift, shows a massive split between the army and Imran Khan. Bajwa remarks on US may affect Pakistan-Russia ties and joy in India, right? He says Pakistan Army Chief General Kumar Javed Bajwa statement that the country has excellent ties with the US and that it could not support Russia's invasion of Ukraine may cast a shadow on Pakistan limited security partnership with Russia. Moscow, Imran paying price for disobedience to Washington. Go pray. Pakistan Army disputes. PM says no evidence of US hand in crisis report. Pakistan becomes another front for US and Russia tussle and over. What do we have here? The Samson option. Like the biblical figure, Imran Khan seems willing to bring the house down to confront his opponent. Then we have Imran's no ball. And then we have this. AUKUS to deepen cooperation on hypersonic missiles. And finally, we have this India-Australia strike interim free trade deal. Folks, we are on the right side of history. We are jumping off the fence, hopefully. What we are tied to the strings with Russia in terms of arms and ammunition is now questionable after Armenia, Azerbaijan, and now Ukraine, Russia. Gotta think with clear eyes, folks. Jai Hind.